The forest whispered like a restless spirit, its canopy strangling the moonlight and weaving a shroud of darkness over the hunter's path. Their boots squelched in the damp soil, snapping twigs beneath them, while their torches hissed and spat against the cold night air. Laughter carried among them, sharp and careless, like knives scraping stone. These were not men unused to fear. They had spent their lives chasing prey, and to them, the forest was no more threatening than a caged beast. "Keep your eyes sharp," their leader barked, though the smirk twisting his lips betrayed his confidence. "The night hides many things, but nothing we can't carve down." His companions laughed, voices roughened by drink and arrogance. They were armed to the teeth, steel blades, crossbows slung across their backs, and the swagger of men who had taken too many lives to count. It was then that they saw her. A girl, no taller than a child, standing where the mist parted between the trees. Her figure was still, almost fragile, bathed in a thin beam of moonlight. Dark braids framed her face, her silhouette dwarfed by the endless shadows stretching behind her. She seemed lost, abandoned, too young to survive the dangers of the wilderness. The hunters exchanged looks, and then came the laughter, low at first, then erupting into cruel, mocking cackles. "She's just a child," one sneered, swinging his blade lazily in the air. "A gift from the woods," another guffawed, his teeth glinting in the firelight. "A lamb wandering to the slaughter." But her eyes did not flinch. She gazed at them with a steadiness that unsettled their mirth, even as they tried to laugh louder, as though to drown out the unease curling in their guts. Those eyes were not the eyes of a lost child. They were the eyes of someone who had walked too far into the abyss and returned bearing its scars. For a heartbeat, silence pressed down upon the clearing. The forest itself seemed to lean closer, listening. An owl shrieked somewhere above, and the hunter's laughter faltered. The smallest among them muttered a curse under his breath, shifting uneasily, though the others jeered and struck his shoulder, urging him not to lose nerve. The girl did not speak. She simply breathed, steady and calm, as though waiting. Her hand brushed against something at her side, a massive relic glinting faintly in the half-light. A lantern, impossibly large, its frame etched with patterns older than any of them could name. The faint glow within it shimmered like trapped souls clawing against glass. Though they tried to laugh again, the sound was weaker now, strained. The forest had grown colder. Their torches sputtered as if suffocated. And the hunters, for the first time, felt the weight of shadows pressing in, not from the girl, but from the space around her. They had mocked a child, but she was no child. She was Senna, the Sentinel of Light. And in the stillness that followed, the shadows began to stir. The hunters hesitated, their jeers caught in their throats as the girl, no, the woman, shifted her stance. The relic at her side was no ornament. It was a weapon, a prison, and a beacon all at once. Senna's fingers curled around its handle with the familiarity of one who had carried it through 1,000 battles. The lantern pulsed with a soft green glow, its light casting eerie shapes across the trees, as though the forest itself recoiled from what it contained. She remembered when the lantern had first been entrusted to her. The weight had not been only in its metal frame, but in the burden it carried. Voices, countless voices, forever crying out from the shadow between worlds. She had learned to listen, not with her ears, but with her soul. She had learned that silence was never truly silence, that in every pause the dead whispered. The hunters knew nothing of this. To them, the lantern was merely strange, perhaps dangerous, but surely manageable. They had killed wolves larger than her, faced bandits armed with fire and fury. What could a girl with a glowing trinket possibly do? One of them spat at the ground. "Enough of this, grab her!" But Senna did not move. Instead, she lifted the lantern, slowly, deliberately. The glow intensified, spilling spectral light across the underbrush. Torches dimmed in its presence, their flames shrinking as though cowed. A chill swept over the clearing, biting into skin and bone. The laughter returned, but this time it was nervous, fractured. "It's just a trick," one muttered, gripping his blade tighter. Some illusion to scare us. Senna's gaze pierced him. Her voice, when it came, was low and steady, carrying the weight of something far older than she appeared to be. "You don't understand what follows you," she said. The hunters stiffened. For a moment, they believed she spoke of them. But then the forest answered her. A gust of wind swept through the trees, extinguishing one of the torches. The darkness thickened, wrapping itself around their legs, tugging at their shadows as if they were alive. A shape flitted between the trees, too fast to track, too wrong to belong to any beast of this world. One hunter cursed, his voice trembling. What is this?" Senna held the lantern higher, its light cutting through the mist. Shadows writhed and recoiled, but they did not flee. They circled, waiting, whispering in voices that only she could truly understand. Their cries were a cacophony of pain, loss, and fury. The hunters stumbled back, their bravado cracking. Fear tasted bitter on their tongues. Still, their leader barked, desperate to restore control. "Stand your ground, she's bluffing." But Senna knew better. She could feel the pressure of the veil thinning, the boundary between the living and the dead shuddering at her command. The lantern was not a bluff, it was a promise. And as its light flared, the shadows answered. The first scream ripped through the clearing like a jagged blade, neither human nor animal, but something torn from the raw fabric of despair itself. The hunters froze, their torches quivering in their hands. From the edge of the lantern's glow, a shape materialized, black smoke coiling into a vague form, its face stretching in silent agony before erupting again into a shriek that clawed at their bones. One of the men staggered back, dropping his weapon. "Spirits!" he gasped, his voice cracking. But Senna did not flinch. Her grip on the lantern tightened, her eyes steady, though within her chest she felt every ounce of their pain. These were not monsters. They were remnants, fragments of lives stolen too soon. Each scream was a memory unburied, each wail a plea unanswered. The lantern did not summon them, it revealed them, called them forth into a world that had forgotten them. The shadows surged, twisting around the hunters, their voices overlapping in a maddening chorus. Laughter turned to sobbing, sobbing into rage, rage into begging. Words half-formed, names long lost, accusations hurled into the night. The youngest hunter clapped his hands over his ears, his knees buckling beneath him. "Make it stop," he cried, tears streaking his face. His companions tried to rally, swinging blades through the air, but their steel cut only wind. For every shadow they struck, 3 more rose, whispering and screaming, their hollow eyes fixed on the living. Senna raised the lantern higher, its glow swelling. She whispered under her breath, not to the hunters but to the voices. "I hear you," she said. "I will not let you be forgotten." The shadows recoiled, not in fear but in acknowledgement. Their shrieks shifted, a tremor of recognition running through their howls. They circled the hunters, their forms weaving tighter, a spiral of torment closing in. "Why are they screaming?" one hunter demanded, his voice shaking as he swung his crossbow wildly. "What do they want?" Senna's gaze turned to him, her expression grave. "They want release, they want justice." The leader snarled, though his bravado was crumbling. "Lies! They're tricks of the dark!" But his voice betrayed the tremor in his soul, because deep down he knew this was no trick. These shadows knew him, they knew all of them. From the void came a figure clearer than the rest, a woman's form, her face streaked with spectral tears. She reached for one of the hunters, and he recoiled as if her touch burned. His scream joined theirs, a harmony of agony. The forest seemed to pulse with the cries, the ground itself trembling beneath the weight of so many lost souls. And as the hunters faltered, their courage shattering, Senna's lantern shone brighter still, her voice rising above the storm. "You will be heard," she vowed, "every last one of you." And with those words, the shadows closed in. The lantern flared, and its light was no longer gentle. It poured out in waves of searing emerald, tearing through the night like a flood. The hunters shielded their eyes, but the brilliance was not meant for them. It was meant for the truth that clung to their shadows. In the glow, the forest transformed. Every tree, every root, every patch of fog became a mirror for memory. The men's own sins unfurled before them like banners carried into war. Blood spilled in villages. Laughter as they hunted the defenseless, the faces of those they had wronged emerging from the shadows with eyes full of accusation. The leader cursed and swung his sword, but it sliced only air, only echoes of the past that no blade could banish. His voice cracked as he roared, "Illusions! They're nothing but illusions." But the figures pressing in were not illusions. They were the dead. They were the forgotten. They were justice demanding to be seen. One hunter fell to his knees, clutching his head as the phantom of a boy appeared before him, a boy with hollow eyes, his small hands trembling as if still chained. The hunter screamed, sobbing, reaching out to push the vision away, but the boy clung to him, his presence heavier than any iron. "Please, stop," the man begged, though no one listened. Another was cornered by the shape of a woman with hair like fire, her throat marred by a wound that no healer could have mended. She whispered his name, and he dropped his weapon, his voice breaking into a prayer for forgiveness. But prayers had no weight here. Only truth did. The hunters' laughter was gone. Their cries filled the clearing now, a discordant symphony that matched the wailing of the shadows. Panic stripped them bare, exposing the rotting core of their arrogance. Senna stood in the center of it all, lantern raised, her jaw set. This was not vengeance, it was not cruelty, it was the balance that the living had refused to uphold. The dead had been denied peace, and she was the vessel that carried their demand. The leader stumbled forward, sweat streaming down his face, eyes wide with terror. "Please!" he shouted at her, his voice raw. "End this! I'll change, I swear it! Just stop!" But the lantern pulsed again, its glow intensifying, and the shadows answered with their verdict. They swarmed him, not with claws or teeth, but with faces, faces of every soul he had silenced. His screams merged with theirs until they became indistinguishable, one endless cry of reckoning. Senna did not waver. She allowed the lantern to do what it was meant to reveal, to confront, to deliver justice. When at last the storm quieted, the clearing was empty of laughter, empty of torment. The hunters' voices faded into the night, leaving behind only drifting motes of spectral ash that vanished on the wind. Senna lowered the lantern. Her eyes burned with sorrow, but her hand was steady. The judgment was done. The forest was still, not the ordinary stillness of night, but the heavy silence that follows a storm. The silence of something finished, something irreversible. The air smelled of smoke and iron, though no fire had burned. Where the hunters had stood, only the faint shimmer of fading souls drifted upward, dissolving into the mist. Their echoes lingered a moment longer, like ripples on water, before vanishing completely. Senna stood alone in the clearing, the lantern lowered but still glowing faintly in her grasp. The light within had quieted, its furious blaze settling into a steady, mournful pulse. The shadows had been heard, justice had been delivered, and yet the weight in her chest was heavier than before. She closed her eyes, listening. The forest breath was slow, almost cautious, as though the very earth recognized what had transpired. The usual chorus of crickets and owls was absent, replaced by a solemn hush that honored the dead. For a fleeting second, she thought she heard a voice, soft, grateful, whispering her name. It faded before she could be sure. Senna inhaled, steadying herself. The lantern was not merely a weapon, it was a covenant, a promise that no soul would remain forgotten, no shadow would be silenced forever. But every time she fulfilled that promise, she carried part of their sorrow with her. Each cry etched itself into her heart, each plea a reminder that peace was never easily won. She turned her gaze upward. Through the tangled canopy, a sliver of moonlight broke through, falling across her face. For a moment it felt like a blessing, a reminder that light persisted, even here, even now. Her steps echoed softly as she moved away from the clearing, boots sinking into the damp soil. The forest seemed to part for her, the mist curling aside, the trees leaning away. She was not pursued, not watched, only followed by the memory of what she had done. Behind her, the place where the hunters had laughed would never be the same. Their arrogance, their cruelty had fed the shadows. Their downfall was not merely their own, but a lesson left behind for any who dared mock what they did not understand. Senna's shoulders were heavy, but her stride remained unbroken. She had chosen this life long ago, not for herself, but for those who no longer had a voice. She was their sentinel, their shield, their avenger, and their release. At the edge of the forest, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest whisper. "Thank you." Senna did not smile, but her eyes softened. She raised the lantern slightly, its glow pulsing in response, as if answering the unseen speaker. Then she stepped into the night, vanishing into the mist once more. The lantern's light swayed like a star in the darkness, a reminder that while shadows would always return, so too would she. And wherever Senna walked, the shadows would never go unheard again.